So welcome back, everybody. This is Paul again, and I'm going to make another in my series about esoteric psychology. And as I mentioned in the first couple episodes, first of all, my qualifications, I'm not a professional psychologist or therapist, but what I have is an experience of meditation for many, many years and my own personal journey of discovery of my own being as a purpose on this life and everything, just like we all have. We have a journey. And I've read an awful lot of books, and I've listened to an awful lot of great teachers, and just tremendous taking a lot of information in and trying to help myself understand my own psychology. Because there's an old saying that if you understand your own being, you can understand others. And just like they say, if you're trying to train as a psychologist, you have to go through your own process of self-discovery so that when you're conducting, very personal conversations with people about intimate aspects of their lives, that you're not putting on some kind of a projection, or you're not having your own concepts get in the way of your therapy. Now, esoteric psychology is a depth psychology, but it goes further than what you might call a Jungian psychology, or what you call a Freudian or whatever. It goes beyond that, because in those types of therapy that are applied for our personal lives, we have to kind of, we have problems in our lives. We have to figure out some clarity and solve certain problems and how to deal with people and so on. And then some of the deeper types of psychology, even in modern day, they encourage people to go deeper and try to help themselves understand some, even to where, you might even think about past lifetimes, or especially things that happened subliminally and so on. And then you get into some very deeper kind of awareness issues, and you try to figure out, well, who are we as beings? Because there's been so many situations where people have had an accident, for example, and then they woke up the next day and they couldn't remember who they were and so on. And so on. So this whole question of who we are has a lot of momentum behind it, and it's a very common theme in human life, and especially when we get into issues of human behavior and so on. Now, the esoteric psychology, I want to refer to a couple of books here. One is The Light of the Soul, which was basically a translation of the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, and some commentary along that line. Very, very profound book. I mentioned it in the previous episode. And another one here, which was basically the esoteric psychology. This was, again, written under the inspiration of a Tibetan yogi, and with close association with one of his students. And they worked out, a whole lot of different... it's very complex, the human psyche, because, first of all, the one thing that I realized, and one thing that the great sages have said, is that basically our human being, our system here, as above, so below. Our body that we grow up, we have this body, and we don't really understand the body. We just kind of live with it, and we go to school, we learn all its parts and so on. But this vehicle here has correspondence, as you might say, as above, so below. It's a microcosm. And the sages tell us that this human body is a microcosm of what they call the divine consciousness, or the supreme consciousness, that in this physical body that we human beings have, it is possible to have a greater experience of soul or of consciousness, both the external and the internal simultaneously, so that we have a more full existence and a lot more clarity. So this, again, the sages say that the human self is like just very simple. There's just a being there. It doesn't have a judgment. Many people have had a near-death experience, an accident, or something, and you have a feeling of being out of your body, and you have a feeling of like, well, once you have that kind of experience, like, whoa, I'm not really this body. It's a very liberating experience that's changed a lot of people's lives. But beyond that, we start to ask the question, well, okay, then what are we then? Because the sages say in these books, Patanjali and other ones, they say, like, this organism that we have, we often think, well, we have these five senses, and everything is division. We have this sense and that sense and this and whatever. We have this hand and this. We itemize and differentiate everything, but when we close our eyes and we're away from all our senses, we feel and experience we are one being. There's only one being here, and it's just like the feeling of the skin. You can feel if you're in a calm place, you can feel the air around you, the presence of the air around your skin. It's an all-in-one sensation. If you understand what I'm saying, it's a totality. Our entire being, you might say, feels the cosmos, because on some subtle level, there's no difference between on an atomic level. There's just electrons here. You see, now. Ancient sages and yogis experimented with the body, and they did very disciplined and extreme things. So, they would fast, and they do all kinds of stuff to their body and stand on their head and try to test themselves in the cold, and a lot of interesting things that people did. And what in the process of of finding their own limits in their body and so on, they also experienced the beyond the limits. And there are people who've learned how to leave their body at will. They just close their eyes and they can do things. So basically what I've been saying in some of these other videos is that this human body, as testified by these great sages and so on, and thousands of years of testimony, and living people too, realize that this body is one integrated sensing organism, the totality of it, of which, just like our body has fingers, our mind has some senses, some physical senses, and yet there are other areas of sensation and consciousness and cognition that we have. For example, when we're sitting down, we may be quiet, and we might not hearing much, and we might not see much, but it's in a state like that we might start sensing air pressure, electrical fields. You sense warmth, and then you start getting into things like you start having maybe visions of things at a distance, or intuitions about somebody. Maybe you're thinking about somebody, and just that minute they call you because there's ESP going on. So one of the things that yogis and sages did, and people, shamans, they would do things to their body. Like I said, they might go in a cave for a long time and they get into the dark, or they just do something. And they force their body into they basically, the tendency to mind, and we call the mind intellect from an esoteric point of view. There's just like this certain fixation on identity and compare and contrast and evaluation and logic and all that stuff we call our mind. And then we have a greater awareness that the mind is like a tool for that greater awareness. For example, you can, just like this pencil, I can think, or I can not think. I can use this tool, the brain, the thinking process, or the intellect, and then I can decide to put it down. And when I put that down, it doesn't mean I can't do anything, because when you put the intellect down, when you rest your thoughts, and if you rest your thoughts long enough and go, like there's a Buddha said supposedly that if you have no thoughts for 15 seconds, completely do nothing, you're going to have another pretty powerful experience. Well, when we go to a complete peace place through meditation, or what we call samadhi or anything, we're totally let go, feeling ourselves riding like on a wave of the ocean, just feeling our existence. It's an experience of this one awareness that is simultaneously conscious of the other senses and also the internal experience. Now, consciousness is vast, see, and there are stages and so-called initiations that people take, and yogis have said, look, you'd be shocked at how if people practice for a whole lifetime and they do certain things, then they eat certain foods and so on, they can truly have some absolutely astounding, magical, fantastic experiences with this human body. Most people don't do that though, and frankly, that's not really necessary because, there's people who can walk on a tightrope, but that doesn't mean everybody needs to walk on a tightrope to have a life. There's other ways that this awareness can awaken in other activities that we do. Like sometimes, for example, have you ever noticed if you've really gotten really stressed out in some intense situation, and then you just stop. If you completely stop for a few seconds, just sometimes even just like 20 seconds, it's just profound. So when I talk about the unity of awareness, I talk about this is something that can be expanded, just like the ocean is really big. So you sit in the ocean, you can feel, okay, maybe you feel the whole bay. You're in this bay, you can see that part. At least that's pretty big, okay? But as you go on in experience of knowledge and meditation and contemplation, or your field of consciousness just grows. I mean, it's infinite. So there's a lot of people in my early days of when I was meditating, I always thought, well, maybe someday, I want to find out what Atlantis was like, and I'm going to go back there and, do stuff or whatever, and just observe what was going on. But those are silly ideas because overall, why go back anywhere? Just go to the place where everything is, in the sense of our unity, and then there's a formlessness, and there's you can say like, okay, there's cosmic entertainment if we can find fantastic visions and all kinds of experiences, but ultimately there's a silence of being, a silence of thoughts where the thoughts stop, and it's just there's a formlessness, you might say, of awareness. Now, a lot of that has to do with just letting go, because this is not something you achieve. This is something you let go. It's like we come to this world, and we, next thing you know, we're a teenager, and we got this burden. Let's pretend we're carrying our suitcase, okay? And every year in life, we add a little more stuff into our suitcase, and next thing you know, it's a big trunk, and we're carrying this heavy burden through our life, and it all has our costumes in it, our various clothes, and all our things that make us fit us in our identity, our bag of tricks, you might say. But our real nature is a lot simpler than that, you see, and in the simplicity is a oneness of formlessness, of non-local awareness. Just like sometimes when you're in a really special space and you just sense, okay, maybe someone that you love, or maybe you have a child in another room and you just start feeling you can feel another person's presence or something. It's a non-local thing, and the reality is that the reason that ESP works is because in reality, there isn't any difference. It's not like there really are over there, because it just seems like we're not connected, but again, the facility of this human body, the sages say, and different teachers, this body that we have has internal, our bodies, our nerves, our organs, things like the thyroid and the pineal gland and those kind of things, the endocrine system, they're all incredible. And they allow the human being to have a very special kind of experience in this life, and it's not limited. It's like, see, a lot of misconception of people about who we are as human beings is like, well, we compare and contrast each other. Well, and we compare and say, well, I'm so I'm like this or I'm like that. But ultimately, we limit ourselves and our psyche by drawing circles around our identity, in a sense. Okay, so I want to check my notes here, make sure I'm following somewhat of what I wanted to say, but again, everything that I talk about with psychology has to do with the unity of awareness, and how, you see, to understand any other being, we have to understand ourselves. You see, that's a really interesting, dilemma that human beings are in. We go about our lives and we look, and even psychologists, they might go through the whole career, like their whole schooling, they go like, they're always looking out, 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 out. And they have a little bit of understanding of themselves, and maybe they master some of their talents and so on, but they don't really go to the level where the yogis would go in their awareness. They don't go into that unity awareness. They don't go into that deep samadhi rest in the silence of beingness. So what I try to encourage people to do is, look, I'm not a professional, but what I'm talking about is really simple, and what I'm trying to say is wake up. Something I might say will trigger, facilitate, open up to some experience that people have that, wow, I didn't know I could feel that or experience that. Because I can't it's not like I can take a flash drive and say, well, okay, just, plug this in and you'll have an experience or something, because it's a totally unique experience of being alive for each of us. But what I'm trying to say is that no matter who we are, there's expansions in awareness that we can have that are not difficult and really necessary for us to have a greater and more joyful experience of this life. And again, my experience, it's like it's a continuum. Consciousness is a continuum. It's like, let's say you go into a room and you start seeing, next thing you know, you realize that you're in the room that you're in is even bigger and bigger and bigger. The same way with the internal world of meditation, you realize, well, at first, like, okay, you have some powerful experience, like, wow, that's pretty big. And then after a while, you realize, well, that's the beginning. It's pretty big. It's pretty. The internal world. It's a mystical thing, but it's a scientific thing, because you can say, like the scientists say, look, there's more space in an atom. It's like hard to understand that what's common to everything is space. There's a neutrality and emptiness, but space is filled with energy. It's filled with information and potential, on from the macro scale all the way down to tiny, 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 tiny. And it's through our meditation that we start to realize that there's subtleties. There's subtleties everywhere. Every part of our life is subtle. There's every moment. The moment can get refined and refined and refined, and realize there's a continuum of moments. Moment to moment to moment to moment, we live this life, and it's all one awareness. Physical space, physical objects are at the microscopic scale. They're just not separated because they're down to the electrical. So as far as understanding what our potential is as human beings, we just, some understanding. We don't have to master and know all the details. We don't have to become a doctor and know all our endocrine systems and all those and chakras and things like that. We just need to know, for one thing, we're a complete being, and that complete being is a sensing organism that is constantly perceiving, and giving us information. But because of our divided attention, we often like say, okay, we only allow ourselves to filter a little bit of what's coming into us, because just slowing down a little bit more, you realize that there's a lot more going on internally and externally in our being. And then the yogis say, well, the most restful place is the deep peace, where there's complete union, there's no separation, there's no judgment, there's just joy. And then at that point, you see, that's why the great sages say, well, treat others as you would treat yourself. Why? Because there's no difference. On some level, there's really no difference between you and another being. It's just it's a realizable fact, not a theory. You see, and once it's realized in truth, in actual experience, you start realizing, it's like, okay, now I understand why I would treat all other beings, just try to treat them nice, because there's some kind of interconnection You see, and the more you build that with other beings, the connection, you realize, well, see, then you grow. You give, when you give to other people, you know, if you want to have a lot of joy in life, give joy to other beings. You see, you can watch your dog be happy and then you feel happy. You see, you can do something nice for your cat and then or another person. It makes you feel good because you see and you enjoy other joy. You start to understand where we all are one. You see, and it's not like a theory. This is the reality that somehow deep inside us we all know there's a unity of awareness. Because loving others and uniting with others feels so good. And being quiet and uniting with their own being and getting integrated feels so good because it's a necessary part of our existence. And it's the most natural part. So I have to make these videos a little shorter here, but the point I want to say is that, you know, there's the valve between our conscious and our unconscious mind. We just get more and more conscious and less unconscious. And so, you know, the yogis, they say the great yogis, they discipline their life and they really, you know, some of them are just like, they were conscious, they never went to sleep. They're just like, you know, they're conscious. When they lay their body down, they just stay conscious, and in the morning they wake up, or they can sleep or not sleep. But, you know, there are people who train their bodies in very phenomenal ways to go beyond and build that bridge, a bridge between our conscious and our unconscious, so that you know, they say Vivekananda was a great yogi. What an amazing guy he was. He could put his sleep on top with his head on a book, and he'd memorize the whole book because he was like working all night long, just, you know, grasping knowledge into the fabric of this creation, into the air and everything, and all the different atoms. There's geometry, there's energy, there's various principles built into how this thing functions. This whole thing keeps us together. It has to be integrated from the tiniest micro to the macro. You see, so there's a certain oneness. There's an old saying that if you understand one piece of gold, then everything else made of gold you understand. If we understand this being, this life that we are, then we'll have a very, very much better understanding of all the other types of beings, whether they have a different form or not. It's just life is life, if on that one elemental level. So again, to summarize a little bit in the beginning here, esoteric psychology is about unity of awareness, about non-local awareness. It's about expanding potential and helping us integrate external perception with internal perception. So that, for example, Tesla, supposedly he could imagine an entire machine and all the calculations in his brain, and then, you know, he'd have it all in his brain, and then he could make it. You see, so our human awareness can harness internal mechanisms unique to each of us, but, you know, the human being has them, so we can activate different ones. Like every car has different little mini features or whatever, but they basically do the same thing. Each of us has their own features, talents that we can develop depending on our propensity. So esoteric psychology is, you know, narrowed down is to become very, very, very simple. It's just who we are. There's a non-verbal answer to that question of who we are, and you can sit in contemplation and samadhi and deep meditation for a long, long time and enjoy seeing and feeling what you are, and then go about your life and do a lot of other interesting things, and then come back and sit again and realize, oh, how amazing this life is, that every single day you can just grow and expand and have deeper inner awarenesses. And besides our outer activities, we can do so many different outer activities, but we get tired and old or whatever. But internally, our being can expand and explore all kinds of amazing awarenesses. Just, you know, some yogis just sit in yogi position for hours and hours, like all night long, just being conscious, whatever it was they're conscious of, but very joyful and peaceful. So anyway, I hope I I'm sure it's something of useful to somebody. I know don't have a really huge audience. It's okay. Even though a few people could benefit, but that can also change. And in the past, I've made a lot of other videos, and many of I've had a lot more videos, but and scenes. But I keep repeating myself in the sense talking about perception and how we can expand it, because this is our life, and we have this little chance, little perception that we can go and experience this life with. So I encourage people to listen more and just follow your heart to find any kind of teacher expansion. Go look and most of all, just sit sometimes and just be without any label after that. Just. So thanks for watching again. I have to make these videos short because of it takes a long time to upload them. But if you like it, please share and comment. I'd love to hearing from people. Thanks again for watching and listening.